get started, thank you all for taking the time to come be here. I know there's a lot of busy things that you can be doing on a Thursday night, so I appreciate you all finding time to be here, so thank you. Wanted to say that Mr. Slake wanted to be here, but she had a schedule of conflicts, a conflict in her schedule. She had previously had scheduled to attend a conference in the Twin Cities, the middle school conference. So she wanted to be here, but she could not. We are taping it though, and she will be reviewing the tape and going over it at the next all-staff meeting with teachers. So she wanted to make sure that we had said that. My name is Aaron Welch. I'm the P&I coordinator here at the school. We have recently added vaping to our substances that we message to in our prevention efforts. And this is Kaylee from the SHIP organization, and her intern, Kaylee, as well. Wanted to introduce them. They have a wonderful presentation full of lots of important information. And so without further ado, I'll let them take over.
Would you like us to use the microphone? I think we need it.
For the recording.
So we're here to talk about e-cigarettes and what we can do for prevention, and we're going to examine them in depth. Tobacco is still the #1 cause of preventable death and disease. It kills about 5,900 Minnesotans a year. It's projected to kill 102,000 youth. It affects us in costs as well. It affects $2.5 billion in healthcare costs. And individually, whether you smoke or not, you end up paying about $568 a year. I do want to mention that today we are talking about combustible tobacco products, not sacred tobacco products. And then I also want to mention, people are starting to realize, but people ask me if e-cigarettes are tobacco products, and they are, so I'm just going to start that out right away. And they are not a cessation device. Some people say that they are, but about 10 years ago, the FDA approached them asking them if they wanted to be a cessation device. And they actually ended up suing the FDA, saying they did not want to be a cessation device. They had other plans for their products. So I'm going to start out with some statistics. This is the Minnesota Adult Tobacco Survey. As you can see, the most common product for adults 18 and up is cigarettes. That did decrease slightly from 2014 to 2018. And then slightly e-cigarettes increased. This is from the same adult tobacco survey. It shows the e-cigarette use in the past 30 days. You can see that the population that is using e-cigarettes the most is the 18 to 24-year-old. And you can see from 2014 to 2018 there was quite a dramatic rise in use. Some of that might be accounted for because the kids that were vaping now aged into that adult population, so that was maybe why there's such a drastic cause. You can also see as the population ages that e-cigarette use declines. So when they say this is for adults and to be used for a cessation device, you can see that it's more commonly used for the younger generations. This slide talks about who is using the e-cigarette uses in the past 30 days. In 2014, it was typically people that already used cigarettes. But in 2018, something interesting happened, and people that never smoked started using these e-cigarettes more than people that were smoking. Unfortunately, these people maybe never would have started using tobacco products, and now they have. And what's also interesting is that former smokers are picking up the habit and starting to smoke again using e-cigarettes. Youth tobacco has increased for the first time in 17 years, and this was in 2017. Since 2017, it's increased more, and this is largely because of e-cigarette use. There is some good news. Fewer than 10% of high school students are smoking regular combustible cigarettes. This is a 70% decrease since 2000, so that's great news. Unfortunately, e-cigarette products are threatening that. So that's why it's important that we kind of nip in the bud e-cigarette use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different generations of e-cigarettes, and I think we'll actually pass them around since this is a smaller group. The first generation is a disposable e-cigarette. I don't have any examples of that, but this generation of e-cigarettes looked more like the typical cigarette. They were one-time use. The second generation is a vape pen. They vary in size. Some are larger, like this pitcher, and some are thinner, like an actual pen. These you can fill up with an e-liquid. You charge them, so you can use them over and over again. The third generation is probably what some people associate with e-cigarettes. Has that larger puff of smoke, and you can actually control how much smoke comes out of the e-cigarette. This is another refillable device and a rechargeable device. It's called the mod generation because it's modifiable. The users can change out the batteries, change out the parts, and that also poses a little bit of a danger, and we'll talk about that later on as well. And the fourth generation, where we are and what we're seeing today, is the pod mod. So these devices typically use a pod. They're not refillable, you just replace the pod and throw away the other one. They use the nicotine salt technology mostly in this generation, which we'll also touch on a little bit more later in the presentation. And the pod mod generation also is more appealing to youth because it's more technology related. They can customize it with different wraps and different colors they can pick out. Also with this generation, they get a higher level of nicotine. So I want to talk a little bit about what's in the e-liquids. We have these four main components. Nicotine is one of the main components, and it's actually in 99% of all e-cigarettes. So even if on one side of the packaging it says no nicotine, on the other side of the packaging I've actually seen where it says nicotine is included, but they don't even have to say that on the packaging at all. They also include flavoring agents. Propylglycol is one of those flavor agents. This is used to retain the moisture and helps the aerosol heat up. And then also vegetable glycerin is included. So some of these products might be okay for oral consumption, but that doesn't mean they're approved for inhaling into your lungs. The lungs are a more sensitive tissue than the stomach. So the e-liquid aerosol contains most of the same things, and it does pose a secondhand emission risk. It contains nicotine, organic compounds, ultrafine particles like lead, tin, and nickel. All those ultrafine particles, when you inhale it, they get stuck in your lungs and pose irreversible damage to your lungs. They also have cancer-causing chemicals like diacetyl. So now I want to talk more in depth about the individual chemicals that are in these, just a few of the chemicals that are in the vaping devices. So the first chemical I want to talk about is propylglycol. This is a chemical that's in antifreeze, and it's also used to winterize your plumbing systems. So that's in e-cigarettes. Another common chemical in e-cigarettes is acetone. This is what we use to take off our nail polish. It's also used in paint thinner. Benzene is also found in e-cigarettes. This is a chemical that's used as a pesticide. It's used in synthetic rubber and paints and inks. Formaldehyde is present in e-cigarettes. This is the chemical that's used to temporarily preserve human bodies and animal remains. Nicotine is probably one of the most important components that's in e-cigarettes because of the addicting component and the component that makes the user want to keep on using e-cigarettes. Rubidium, this is the agent that's used to make fireworks bright, is in e-cigarettes. So basically what I'm getting at when I'm showing all these pictures is that when someone tells you that an e-cigarette just contains water vapor, that's not the case. There's lots of different chemicals. This is just 6 out of the many hundreds of chemicals The only thing that makes water vapor is water.
And I'm going to take over for a little bit of the data. So this is coming from the Minnesota Student Survey. Some of the highlights that they have, and youth e-cigarette use is actually now deemed a public health threat. The FDA has even called it an epidemic. It's one of the new focuses. Since 2016, e-cigarette use has increased sharply among Minnesota high school students, and students now use e-cigarettes at 5 times the rate of conventional cigarette use. Additionally, nearly 6% of adults currently use e-cigarettes compared to less than 2% in 2010. And nearly 13% of adults aged 18 to 24 use e-cigarettes. The use of multiple tobacco products, which is considered dual use, is common. Most adult e-cigarette users also use cigarettes. So that's common if you would see someone who uses an e-cigarette in conjunction with the typical tobacco products. Looking again at just a little bit more data, this is the percentage of students who have tried an e-cigarette, and as you can see, a lot of that's coming into high school. And as those kids do approach 18, which is currently the legal age to purchase, that is getting a lot higher of a rate. You have friends that are able to buy, and we're really seeing those rates rise through friendships as well. So from 2017 to 2019, there was a 5.6% increase in the vape usage according to the USC. That would be the Positive Community Norm Survey data. But 88.4% still don't vape monthly or more, which is great news. So when looking at the data, the Minnesota Student Survey specifically asked, the question was, when you vaped or used an e-cigarette during the last 30 days, how did you get it? This was actually one of the most interesting areas of data. In 8th grade, 50% of the students said they got it from friends, and 50% said they got it from someone they didn't know. In 9th grade, 83% of the students said they got it from their friends, and 17% said they got it from getting someone to buy it for them, so a stranger actually. And in 11th grade, 100% of them said they got it from friends. And that may very well be due to the fact that when you're in 11th grade, you may easily have friends that are over 18 and are able to purchase those products for you. Of students surveyed in Minnesota, most of them don't perceive e-cigarettes as a danger, and this reveals an alarming misconception about the risk of e-cigarette use and the need to educate not only the youth but the parents as well, because 3 out of 4 Minnesota 11th graders don't perceive them as a danger. And these trends don't actually stop with kids. The use of e-cigarettes has increased significantly among Minnesota's young adults as well, possibly due to the previous youth now aging to be young adults. But 3 in 4 of these youth adult e-cigarette users have never used traditional tobacco products before. And this suggests that e-cigarettes are becoming a path into nicotine and addiction for many people. Nearly all e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which we know is highly addictive. Nicotine exposure can also harm the developing adolescent brain. Because the brain is still developing until about age 25, youth and young adult exposure to nicotine can lead to addiction and disruptive attention and learning, and no amount of nicotine is safe for youth. Nicotine actually primes the adolescent brain for addiction. So because the brain is still developing, adolescents can become addicted to nicotine at an easier rate, much quicker. And nicotine can actually change their brain chemistry and making them more susceptible to future addictions. So the earlier the exposure, the greater the risk, whether that be to alcohol, other drugs, whatever it may be. So those exposed are more likely to use other substances. The receptors in the brain are stimulated when they're exposed to that nicotine, and that actually triggers a rewarding effect on the brain. So these receptors then respond and enhance the effects of nicotine and other drugs on the brain. So the more adolescents are exposed to nicotine, the greater the sense of enjoyment that they get from the other drugs because of nicotine and because of the repeated exposures. So this effect actually increases the likelihood that they will develop a dependence on a drug. So looking again at that Positive Community Norms survey data, in 7th through 12th grade, students who use marijuana monthly or more often are 16.9 times more likely to vape monthly or more often than students who use marijuana less than monthly. Coming from that same survey data, in 2019, 7th through 12th grade students who drank alcohol monthly or more often are 45 times more likely to vape monthly or more often than students who drink alcohol less than monthly. So they've seen some crazy numbers. So with nicotine being a highly addictive drug, studies show that symptoms of nicotine addiction can appear among youth within only a few days or weeks after smoking initiation, and that goes along with how quickly that addiction actually sets in and occurs. A lot quicker than in older adults. This raises concerns about the potential for addiction. Youth are reporting signs of severe dependence, such as inability to concentrate in class, using an e-cigarette right when they wake up in the morning, or actually waking up in the middle of the night with cravings and having to use their e-cigarette in the middle of the night. Over 1 in 5 of Minnesota high school students who has tried e-cigarettes has never tried any conventional tobacco products. So recent evidence suggests that compared to youth who have never used them, youth who have tried e-cigarettes are twice as likely to start smoking in the future. So now we have kids who would have never picked up a cigarette that are at a risk for starting smoking conventional cigarettes. If you don't know, a standard pack of cigarettes contains 20 cigarettes. We're going back. There is 1 milligram of nicotine absorption per cigarette, so there's about 20 milligrams of nicotine in 1 whole pack of cigarettes. Unlike other e-juices, which may or may not contain nicotine, all salt-based e-juices contain nicotine. So especially going to those Juuls, those Mod Pods, those do all contain nicotine. According to Juul Labs, 1 Juul pod contains 41.3 milligrams of nicotine. So this is equal to the amount of nicotine you'll find in about 40 cigarettes. So that's about 2 packs of cigarettes. As mentioned before, this is a high amount of nicotine and can be intense for first-time users especially. Our concern is that young people are being introduced to a high amount of nicotine, developing a tolerance quickly, and becoming addicted as a result. 1 fixed pod contains 75 milligrams of nicotine, which is equivalent to 75 cigarettes. How many packs of cigarettes do you guys think that would be equal to that? Yeah, almost 4 packs. Yep. So 1 Surin cartridge contains up to almost 90 milligrams of nicotine, or 90 cigarettes. So how many packs is that if you're at 20 in a pack? Yep. You're about 4.5 packs of cigarette in this 1 little pod, and people can actually go, people will leave through that easily in a day or half a day, numerous pods in a day. And the way that an e-cigarette is used or modified also affects the delivery of that nicotine to an individual user. So especially going to those 3rd generation devices, when they're able to control things a little bit more, they're able to receive different amounts. So they come in all shapes and sizes, and a specific product called Juul looks like a USB flash drive. That's one of the specific ones we had passed around. And they are easily hidden, they emit a limited odor, and the aerosol dissipates very quickly. Juul pods, which come in fruit and other flavors, and we know flavored tobacco products appeal to youth. They also contain the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes, sometimes up to 2. These new products use nicotine salts, which go more directly to the brain. Juul pods have 59 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine, so it's about a 5% strength of nicotine within those Juul pods. This is the highest level of nicotine on the e-cigarette market. In fact, unlike your average e-cigarette, Juul devices now deliver nicotine at a higher level that actually mimics that of a cigarette, which is kind of crazy. Sales of Juul has grown more than 7-fold from 2016 to 2017 and was the most commonly sold e-cigarette in the US in 2017. So obviously that's already 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, so that has, of course, increased since then. And e-cigarettes and other vaping products like Juul will not be subject to FDA regulation until May 2021. So until then, they can, say that there's no nicotine in it, you flip it over, there's nicotine, whatever other chemicals they would choose to put in there. So some e-cigarette products deliver nicotine as effectively as a cigarette and just as efficiently as well. The use of nicotine salts also lowers the pH of e-liquids, which allows higher concentrations of nicotine to be delivered with less irritation. So kids, when they're using these vape products, they aren't getting that harshness on their throat, and they aren't feeling the effects of it like you would smoking a traditional cigarette. For example, the maker of Juul claims that the product has a nicotine content like traditional cigarettes, and that it delivers the nicotine up to 2.7 times faster than other e-cigarettes. In the US, Juul devices were originally introduced with a 5% nicotine salt pod. Following suit, Juul competitors began offering nicotine salt concentrations as high as 7% in what has now kind of been deemed the nicotine arms race. However, in 2018, Juul introduced a lower nicotine pod with 3% nicotine strength. That's a little good, but products in Europe are actually only allowed to have concentrations of 2% or lower. They have now actually restricted and limited that, but the pods in the US being sold are over 3 times that.
So I'm going to talk about the top 7 things the industry does to target our youth. Of course, there's more than 7 ways they target our youth, but we're just going to talk about the top 7. So this one I call new names, same games. So the new signage is on the right and the old signage is on the left. So you can see they're very similar. They're taking the plays right out of tobacco's playbook. They're both using Santa to target youth, and that's really quite sad. Another way they target the youth is with over 15,000 flavors. By the time one flavor gets taken off the market, unfortunately, many others take its place. 4 out of 5 kids who have used tobacco products typically start with a flavored product. As you can see, these products are very, very appealing to youth, and they would want to experiment. They're attracting them with things like alien vape, witch's blood, cotton candy, apple juice. I don't think the apple juice flavor is for all the grandmas out there using these as a cessation device. And then to note again, none of these are FDA regulated. And then of course, another way they're targeting our youth is all the ads. Youth are seeing ads all the time. 88.4% of students say they see an ad promoting e-cigarettes every day. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they have used in the past race cars, they're using celebrities to promote these products, bright colors, figures that youth look up to. They're young people, all very appealing to youth. This is a false advertisement, and I'm going to read you the fine print on this. They advertise falsely in many different ways, encouraging them to try products and telling them that they're healthy. So this says, verbatim, "Blue is the smart choice for smokers wanting a change. Take back your freedom to smoke when and where you want, without ash or smell. Blue is everything you enjoy about smoking and nothing else. Nobody likes a quitter." So there's a lot of things wrong with that ad. They're implying that it's healthy and safe. They're telling youth there's no smell, so kind of implying they can get away with using it. Saying, take back your freedom. And then they're telling them not to quit, that nobody wants them to quit, which is interesting if it's a cessation device, but, Another way they're targeting youth is with money and coupons. So you can find coupons online, you can find coupons in stores. They had quite a great coupon going this September for people wanting to smoke e-cigarettes. It was 99 cents for a Juul starter pack. So that's 4 pods, and the Juul itself was 99 cents in September, and it seems to line up really well with the start of school. I don't think that's by accident. And then they'll also reach out via social media to youth and offer them coupons through messaging. Online vendors is another issue. In the past, they weren't getting much traction, but in 2019, those have picked up. And I think it was the top 3, according to USC's data, ways that they get vapes. But here's an actual picture of what I had to click to get into the site to purchase my sweater over there. I just had to click that I was 18. I didn't even have to try to think of a birthday that would make me 18. I just had to click the green button. And then of course they offer free shipping as well. This is the interesting way. The 7th way that they target youth is the stealth mode. They have the Juul pod, the Juul, which looks like a flash drive. It's also very light, so you can sneak it in a pocket. Youth, I've heard, are tucking them into bras and into underwear. They have the vaping sweatshirt, which we'll pass around. This sweatshirt is the summer version of it. but they also have lawn sleeve. They have the popular Sherpa fabric. So you just have to purchase the adapter for your e-cigarette, and then on the other string they can vape. And it just kind of goes around the hood. So that's one of the stealth ways. This is actually a picture on the right of an inhaler, disguised as an inhaler, but it's actually a vaping device. And the picture on the left is a phone case. That's a vaping device. There's a watch that's a vaping device. They just pop the screen out, and I think it looks pretty similar to an Apple Watch. And then there's a vaping backpack for all the really active vapors that want to be able to drink water and then vape on the other side. So now I'm going to go over some facts. Are e-cigarettes less harmful than cigarettes? I think we know they are harmful now after hearing this presentation. We also should have the standard that we want to breathe clean air, and unfortunately we're not going to know the long-term effects of these devices until 20 years down the road. But we know there are short-term effects, and we know that nicotine does affect our youth, and as Keely said, that no amount of nicotine is safe for youth. Can e-cigarettes help someone quit? I've been kind of touching on this throughout the presentation, but they are not an approved, FDA-approved cessation method. In a study that followed people trying to quit smoking for 6 months, people that used e-cigarettes to try to quit smoking, only 10.1% were successful when they used that. And then the ones that did not use e-cigarettes, they were 26.6% of those smokers were successful in quitting. So they don't even make a very good cessation device. And also a thing to consider is for every one smoker that switches from cigarettes to e-cigarettes, 8 kids start using e-cigarettes. 80 kids, not 8. So that's a really sad statistic. E-cigarettes also pose unintentional injury risks for that. A lot of those problems come from those modifiable devices, where they can switch out the batteries and parts and customize them like that. Then we have the problem of explosions and fires. Also, kids think that they can just plug them in next to their phones and charge them all night, and that's not the way it's supposed to be, and that will cause fires. And also the nicotine exposure itself can be toxic, especially toxic to children. And because it's not FDA regulated, they're not required to do child-safe packaging. So that's another concern. I'm sure you've all heard about the outbreak of vaping-related lung illness. It's now up to almost 2,300 cases with 48 deaths, and this is the data as of December 4th. So we are seeing an uptick in that. They're still not able to lock down exactly what is causing it. They're just recommending that people especially don't vape THC products and don't use products off of the black market, but overall, at this time, it's not safe to vape at all. So specifically in Minnesota, we have 127 probable cases, 3 deaths, and 26 more cases are still under review, so we could see a rise in those numbers yet. Specifically in Faribault County, we don't have any, but our neighbors, Watonwan County has 1 case, and Blue Earth County has a case as well. There have been some reports of seizures related to e-cigarettes, 127 of those, and other neurological symptoms, so that's a concern. So when we're talking about this, it's important to talk about how to stop vaping. So these are kind of specific youth resources. I have this printed up here if you want to take it along. This Truth is a program they can text into. We know that youth don't really want to pick up a phone, so they've made a program that they can text into. So that is a good resource, and then that paper has lots more resources available. The thing is with youth quitting, there's not, they usually don't have nicotine replacement therapy like they would with an adult, but because nicotine is unsafe, it poses a challenge. So that's kind of something that we're assessing, and then going to see how we can make better programs for youth at this time. So how can parents protect youth from e-cigarette use? The first step is coming and learning, and so you've already done that, and just learning about the different e-cigarettes, what they look like, and the risks they pose. The second thing you can do is talk to your kids about e-cigarette use, and that's really important. You want to tell them what the risks are and just kind of have those difficult conversations. And then another really important area is to set a positive example of being tobacco-free with cigarettes and e-cigarettes. because we know our children are looking up to us. So a USC statistic is students that report that their parents would feel it was very wrong or wrong to vape are 13 times less likely to vape than those who report their parents would think it was a little bit wrong or not wrong at all. So that's really powerful. So if you express to your kids that you don't want them to vape, they're less likely to vape. So along with that, this is ALA's newest resource. It came out in September. It's called the Vape Talk. There's lots of great resources and more facts. There's also a great conversation guide you can download to talk to your kids. It gives you tips, questions you can ask, maybe typical responses you would get from your kids, just to kind of get that conversation going and help you know what you're going to expect. And then besides this, the CDC also has a conversation guide that you can look up, and kind of it's similar to this, what you can expect and tips to have that conversation. So nationwide, states and communities taking action, these are kind of the different things you can do to help prevent e-cigarette use. So prohibit e-cigarette use sales on the internet, statewide T21 policies or local policies, prohibit flavored tobacco sales. That's a really powerful policy because we know youth are attracted to the flavors, and that's how they typically start, is with the flavored. And implement a youth counter-marketing campaign, so positive community norms. And then increasing the price of tobacco and nicotine products can be really effective as well. So, does anyone have any burning questions you want to ask before we get started on the panel? Otherwise, we'll jump into that. And we do have some questions we want to address, but of course, if you have questions yourself, let us know.